Hey everyone, it's right at 1:15, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to week 3 of Healthy Habits, Eat Well, Be Well. Now that we are in the 3rd week, we're finally getting into the eat portion, talking today about nutrition basics and the building blocks of fuel. It's a lot of information. I could do an entire presentation on almost every slide, but giving you a high-level overview. And if anyone out there would really like some more guidance with this, has more questions, definitely please set up a one-on-one or email me to ask questions or whatever. I'm more than happy to get on the phone with you, set up a meeting, however you want to do that. So again, I realize it's a lot of information, but I'm also going to send everything out, all the resources, everything like that. So just to start with, macro and micronutrients. Macronutrients is a really big buzzword these days. All it means are the nutrients that we need in large quantities. So that is why they're called macro. Water is included in that. However, water has no calories, but we need it in such large quantities. That's why it's in there. But really what we're looking at, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Taking notice that fats have twice as many calories per gram as carbohydrates or protein. So we can rack up a lot more calories from fat than from the other two. Something to be aware of, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I put alcohol in here. It is not a micronutrient. I want to make sure to state that clearly. Alcohol is not a micronutrient, but just to have awareness that it does contain 7 calories per gram. So if you're someone that enjoys wine or beer or a margarita here and there, just to understand there can actually be a lot of calories in that. And just because a beer says it's low carb doesn't mean a whole lot, because the calories are really coming from the alcohol anyway. So, all right, there's a lot on this page. I know that. Carbohydrates. So we have 2 different types of carbohydrates, simple and complex. Regardless, whatever carbohydrate we consume, regardless of the source, will be turned into glucose, which is the form that our bodies need. So it doesn't matter what the source is, that it will get broken down to that. What does matter is the source will determine how long it takes. So simple carbohydrates will have a very strong impact on blood sugar very quickly, because they're usually highly refined, very little breakdown is necessary. So they will increase blood sugar very quickly. However, if they're not consumed along with protein and or fat, your blood sugar will also drop very quickly, requiring more to get the same blood sugar level. Complex carbohydrates are named that because they have longer molecules and because they contain fiber, a lot of vitamins and minerals, and they take our bodies longer to break down. So even though they will be turned into glucose at some point, they don't increase our blood sugar as quickly, nor does it allow for that quick drop. So if you've ever, had a piece of candy or had a regular soda and nothing else with it, you get a little bit of a sugar buzz, and then pretty soon you drop back down and you need more very quickly. So most foods contain some type of carbohydrate. We really want to focus on complex sources, meaning whole grains, beans, legumes, fruits and vegetables, things like that. Keeping in mind that these sources are very nutrient dense without being necessarily very calorie dense, although that varies quite a bit, but meaning they have a lot of nutrition, a lot of vitamins and minerals and other qualities without as many calories as some of the refined options. So starches, we want to have those, in more limited quantities. So things like breads that are, a little bit more refined, regular pastas, rice. And when I say rice, I mean more like the instant variety, whole grain rice that actually still has the germ layer on it and takes time to cook because that germ layer is on it, is considered a complex carbohydrate. We get in trouble with the quick 5-minute boil and bag type stuff because all the nutrition has been stripped out of it. So these foods can be more calorie dense without providing as many nutrients. We also have to talk about glycogen which is the storage form of glucose in our bodies. So our body has to store glucose because the times when we're not eating, it has to draw from those stores to maintain our blood sugar. However, each adult has the capacity to hold about 500 to 600 grams of carbohydrate in the form of glycogen, both in the muscles and in the liver, which equates to approximately 2,000 calories. The liver glycogen is specifically what our bodies use when we're sleeping overnight to make sure our brain is adequately fueled and to make sure that our blood sugar stays stable. So when we wake up in the morning, our liver glycogen is typically almost depleted, if not very close to that. So it can be important to really replenish that first thing in the morning. We have to replace that glycogen once it's depleted to prevent this fancy word called gluconeogenesis, which is the formation of glucose from a non-carbohydrate source. And typically that is going to be protein. So being in a catabolic state is not something you want. That means your muscle is breaking down. Our bodies can use fat to fuel activities, to fuel exercise, to do all that. But our bodies actually do not turn fat into glucose. However, it's a long process that your body can turn protein into sugar. So if you are not eating adequate amounts of carbohydrate, just know that your body at some point has to start breaking down lean muscle tissue to turn it into protein. And that can be a very dangerous state to be in. What is the function of carbohydrates? Well, we need them. For one, our brain and our red blood cells only work on glucose. And as I just mentioned, our bodies don't turn fat into sugar, but they can turn protein into sugar if we are in a state that we're not getting enough. But human life is usually only sustainable with a blood sugar of between 80 and 120 long term. A chronic blood sugar above 120, depending on a couple other factors, is what we consider usually type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance. That's a whole nother lecture. But blood sugar that is too high for too long has many, many bad health side effects, and we have to get that under control for multiple reasons. If your blood sugar drops too much below 80, some people can function a little bit underneath that, maybe at like 70, but if you start getting lower than 60, you get shaky, you can start slurring your speech, you start getting blurry vision. Eventually, you can end up passing out, go into a coma, and even die. So it can be a medical emergency. If someone's blood sugar drops too low, we actually need a simple carbohydrate to get it back up very quickly. So that is absolutely necessary. We also need carbohydrates for optimal hormone and thyroid health. Thyroid is your major metabolic gland, so keeping that healthy is absolutely critical. And actually, some complex carbohydrates before bed can help suppress cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which can actually help you fall asleep. And I believe that's where the whole having a warm glass of milk comes in. But people always ask, well, how much do I need? It is highly variable. So the amount that each person needs very much depends on their body composition, their activity level, what their source of carbohydrate is. So we have a giant range of somewhere between 45 and 65% of overall caloric intake. And I do want to just say right now that people's calorie needs are very, very different. It's not a one size fits all. So the 45 is really on the lower end and would be more appropriate for people that are not very physically active. Some of the fiber-rich carbohydrates to look at, there's a lot of different choices here. And by whole grains, we don't just mean, most whole wheat bread is usually just dyed brown. If it actually has grain in it, that's going to be a lot different. But you also need to be aware that sometimes those whole grain breads can have a lot more calories than some of the other options. So just being aware of what you're putting in your body is very important. Oatmeal is absolutely a fiber-rich carbohydrate complex as long as it's in its natural state. In other words, steel-cut oats or rolled oats that take a while to cook. If you're getting those cute little packets, that's going to be considered more of a starch, like the maple brown sugar or whatever. I I mean, those are better choices than some other things for sure, but it would be more of a simple carbohydrate. Again, with rice, if you're getting the kind of rice that actually takes you 20, 30, 40 minutes to cook because it still has the germ layer intact, you're going to get some fiber and a lot more nutrients than if you're getting the instant boil and bag variety. So selecting our carbohydrate choices wisely. And one of the challenges I'm going to ask this week is that if you are someone that's eating a lot of simple carbohydrates, to maybe find a place that you could swap out, even in 1 or 2 meals, a complex carbohydrate for a simple one. Fiber, very important. When in doubt, make half your plate veggies. You can rarely go wrong with that. You're going to get full faster. You're going to get more nutrients. Now, you can overdo the fiber, but most people don't tend to do that. We've got 2 kinds, soluble and insoluble. The soluble fiber is the stuff that's found mostly in oatmeal, things like that. And it actually helps with blood lipids, with cholesterol. It kind of acts like a pipe cleaner to attach onto some of those undesirable molecules and take them out of our body. Whereas insoluble fiber is stuff that our body does not break down at all. It basically comes out the same way it went in. However, we need that for normal colon health, for our gut bacteria, which is very, very important. Actually, the bacteria in our gut has a big role in our immune system and in the formation of vitamin K, which is really critical for normal blood clotting and things like that. Most adults need somewhere between 25 and 30 grams a day. And again, that can vary based on the person, based on their activity level and things like that. All right, looking at fats. So we have 3 different kinds. Well, there's more than that, but we're gonna just break it down into the 3 major different kinds. We have saturated, which kind of like it sounds, would be solid at room temperature, typically coming from animal products. Some plants like coconut and cocoa would have solid at room temperature, but unsaturated fats, typically these are going to be the ones that have the essential omega fatty acids, termed essential because again, our bodies can't make them, so we have to consume them. We need these for brain health and all sorts of other things, and we're going to find these mostly in plant sources of oil. Unsaturated, the oil itself will be liquid at room temperature for the most part. A trans fat, for the most part, we're trying to avoid that because if they're created in a laboratory, what that means is that they took a fat that is liquid at room temperature, altered the chemical structure so it becomes solid at room temperature, and those molecules actually tend to be a little more sticky and contribute to cholesterol and poor lipid profiles more so than some of the other ones. So margarine is not as healthy as we thought it was because it's full of those trans fats that really are not that great for you. So realistically though, things that are liquid in room temperature, having them in their pure format can be really important, but remember how many calories there are per gram. You don't need excessive amounts of them. However, we absolutely need them. Yes, we use them for energy. We absolutely need fat for long-term energy, for endurance, understanding that metabolic process. We can't really function without it. It is a very important component of all cells. Every cell in your body has what's called a lipid bilayer. So in other words, the protective coating around every cell has a major portion of fat in it. It is involved in nerve conduction. It does help to keep us satisfied, stabilize blood sugar, and many, many other things. So antioxidants are found in a lot of other things as well. An antioxidant can basically be thought of as something that helps to prevent cancer or prevent the breakdown of cellular walls in an unhealthy way. Okay, protein, made up of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, and we have 20 of them that our body needs, both essential and non-essential. The essential ones our bodies cannot make, so we have to eat them. We have to get them in our diet somewhere. And really, the complete proteins, we'll look at that here in a second, but animal sources of protein would have all the essential amino acids. The functions we already mentioned, building blocks of all structures in the body. So not just our muscles, but our bones, ligaments, hair, hormones are all made up of proteins, enzymes that allow you to break down your food. So think lactose, lactase. If someone is lactose intolerant, it means they don't have or can't make that lactase enzyme anymore. Every single food you eat has a specific enzyme required to break it down. And if we are missing one of those essential amino acids, our bodies are going to eventually have some major health ramifications. So super important to know that we're getting all of them. In the nutrition world, if you're looking at meat sources or animal sources of protein, another consideration is the less legs it had when it was alive, probably the healthier it is for you. So four-legged animals, things like pigs and cows, that meat is not going to be as healthy, although it can be prepared in a healthier way than things that had two legs like chickens and turkeys. If it swam when it was alive, it's probably the best option. It has the most omega acids in it, the least cholesterol and things like that. Although ostrich, we can make a good argument for ostrich, but regardless of the source you pick, making them in a way that it's baked or broiled so we have minimal amounts of saturated fat is always going to be the best. So lots of sources for quality proteins, but again, talking about the incomplete and the complete. If you're someone that is a vegetarian avoiding animal products for any reason, and I guess I would say vegetarian versus vegan, if you're a vegetarian but you eat dairy products, then you're getting all the complete proteins, you're getting all the amino acids because they are found in every animal source. If you are a vegan and you're not eating any animal products, then you need to consume what's called complementary proteins. Fortunately, nature has taken care of a lot of that. You don't really have to do too much guesswork. It's things like beans and rice, whole wheat and nuts. So a peanut butter sandwich on whole wheat bread actually provides you all the essential amino acids. Having beans and rice together will provide all the essential amino acids. For anyone out there that is curious about that, wants more information, I'm linking this amazing article here from Precision Nutrition that gives you a ton more information on quality vegetarian protein sources. So look for this a little bit later on today and check that out if you're interested, or of course set up a one-on-one and I can give you more information, send you information or whatever. How much do we need? The $1 million question everybody wants to know. How much protein do I need? Well, I'm not going to go too deep into all the variations, but understand that like carbohydrate, it varies tremendously based on your activity level, your goals. Are you a performance athlete or recreational athlete, someone that just works out? If you're sedentary, if you're trying to gain muscle, it's going to be slightly different. With that said, regardless, the range is typically between 0.5 gram to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. For people that are trying to lose body fat, if they have a target weight, I feel like it's really okay to eat towards that target weight. But the other thing I really want to say about protein, especially if you are consuming animal sources of protein, is that all research indicates there is no benefit to exceeding the daily protein requirements. So if you're exceeding your body weight in protein grams per day, there is number one, no benefit. Number two, those excess calories will still be stored as fat if they're beyond what you need. But also, our bodies actually have to excrete what's called a nitrogen molecule off of animal-based protein, which can lead to, in excessive amounts, dehydration and kidney problems long-term. So there's just no benefit to doing that. If you're someone that is only consuming plant-based proteins, your requirements can actually be more. You can go a little bit higher, specifically because the protein that is in plant-based sources is also bound up with the fiber and things like that. So you automatically don't necessarily absorb as much of it, excuse me, unless you're doing, for example, like a vegan protein powder, like a hemp protein or a pea protein or something like that. Those are going to be fairly digestible, but you're not going to run into the same necessarily issues that you would with plant or animal-based protein if you consume too much of it. So we always also have to look at the distribution of protein throughout the day. Typical American diet kind of looks like this, where we backload it, and not just the protein, but we tend to do that. A lot of people tend to do that with all of their nutrients as well. Most adults don't really have the capacity to digest, metabolize, and absorb more than about 30 grams of protein at one time. That being said, I'm about 4'9", so I'm going to absorb on the lower end, whereas someone like my husband, who is 5'11" and he weighs 160 pounds, he's going to digest more. So it's an approximation. However, still, we want to spread it throughout the day and not load this giant amount on at night. Your body is going to spend forever digesting that. You're probably not going to get all the benefit out of it. And it's just going to be hard to process and break down. Your body will actually work better if you can spread it throughout the day. All right, micronutrients. They are named micro because we need them in smaller amounts. What we're looking at here is vitamins and minerals. So vitamins, sometimes they can be a little trickier to get into our bodies because they are very fragile. They break down. Think about like when you cut open an apple or something, you can watch those cell walls break down almost right away. But some things with vitamins, they do not have calories, neither do minerals. So they don't directly provide energy. But with that said, many of these vitamins and minerals are involved in energy metabolism. So a deficiency in any one of them can cause energy issues. For example, if you are low on B12, that can have a major effect on your energy levels. However, most people don't need to supplement. And I say that because the supplement industry is a huge thing and there is a time and a place for supplementation. However, if you're someone that feels like you need a supplement or you want to take one, I would definitely recommend checking with your doctor. They can do a simple blood test, a metabolic profile to see whether you are in fact deficient in anything. And if you are, they will probably recommend a supplement. And then I would usually guide most people to consult with a registered dietitian to see what they need. That said, most people, if you're including foods from all food groups and eating a wide variety of colors found in nature, you're likely not deficient in anything. And supplementing with more, if you already have enough, doesn't do anything for you. In fact, with the water-soluble vitamins, as you can see here, any excesses are excreted. So if you don't need vitamin B6 or vitamin C and you're taking way more of it than you need, you're just going to pee it out. So you're kind of wasting your money. Fat-soluble vitamins, a little bit different story. So with fat-soluble vitamins, our body does store them in our fat stores, meaning that they can build to toxic levels if taken in excess. So while we absolutely need them, we don't need as much, we don't need to consume them as often. However, supplementing with a fat-soluble vitamin, if you don't have a known deficiency, can lead to a toxic state. And there's many, many problems with that. However, with that said, our bodies are always going to absorb nutrients best from the natural food source anyway. And you're never going to become toxic on vitamin D, for example, because you drank too much milk. You're not going to become toxic on vitamin E or A because you had too many sweet potatoes. You'll become toxic if you take it in a synthetic form. So I always throw caution out there with supplementation. It's not something to just play around with. And the supplement industry it's a hard place to navigate. So if you have more questions about that, definitely let me know and I will be happy to help guide you. So minerals, again, we need them, but we need them in very small amounts. Most people who are eating a balanced diet, meaning they're getting all the food groups, probably aren't deficient. However, major deficiencies can result if we're cutting out certain food groups for a reason. But think about like iron again, for example. We need iron, and people who are not eating meat might in fact need to supplement, but a lot of times they don't. So really important to check with your doctor. If you are not deficient, an iron supplement actually can cause more harm than good, but you're never going to become toxic on iron because you ate too much meat. That natural source is generally not going to get you in trouble. Minerals are also our major electrolytes. They are required for fluid balance, for nerve conduction, for muscle contraction, and so many roles that if we are deficient can cause major problems. But again, supplementing with one of them if you don't know you need it can also cause major problems. So use caution with that. These are also, again, vital in immune system, have roles in metabolism and things like that. But just, again, go cautiously with that sort of thing. All right, we're taking a look here at portion sizes. So it's good to know what they look like because it's really easy to, let's say, fill up a giant bowl with cereal and think you're getting 1 serving, when in fact you might be getting 5. So being aware of what you're putting in your body can be very, very important, regardless of what your goals are. So cereals and starchy grains, usually we're looking at about the size of your fist. And just kind of thinking about, maybe even using bowls or plates that you already know how many, like what the capacity of it is. So you don't have to worry about that, but it's really good to just have an eyeball. If you're eating a regular cereal or you're eating some instant rice or something like that, we're really looking at the size of your fist. With fruit, I always recommend eating the whole fruit, ideally, rather than juice or the dried, just because you're going to get the water, you're going to get the fiber, you're going to get the nutrition in the whole fruit, versus if you've ever made orange juice or tried to make it, you know how many oranges you have to squeeze to get just a little bit of juice. I'm not saying orange juice is bad. However, you're really not getting the fiber and you're not getting as much benefit out of it necessarily. And if there's anyone's out there that is conscious of their body composition, they're maybe looking to lose body fat, drinking the calories can always, they go down easy and you're not necessarily feeling them. Whereas eating the whole fruit will also fill you up and lead to greater satiety. So many reasons to actually have the whole thing. Just looking at the servings, of course, of dairy, typically, for stuff that we're drinking, we're looking at an 8-ounce glass. For yogurt, things like that, 3/4 to a cup. Cottage cheese, maybe a 1/2 cup, but we're kind of looking at what the protein content of those is as well. With protein, when we're looking at animal protein, typically a good portion size rule of thumb is going to be the palm of your hand. And that is going to vary. My hand is smaller than my husband's hand, so my serving size might be a little bit smaller than his. But that's a general good rule of thumb, is looking at your own palm. And again, here's just some basic ideas for some of the plant-based proteins. But of course, if you do want more information about that link that I have in there for that article is very, very helpful. When it comes to fats, I'm going to throw this out there again. They've got 100 grams per tablespoon. So for example, a serving of nuts is very few nuts actually. 2 ounces will barely fit in the palm of your cupped hand. I mean, if it's an almond or a bigger nut, you might be looking at 5 or 6 nuts, like not a whole bag. If you're cooking with olive oil, it can be very dangerous to just dump the oil in the pan because you don't have any idea how much you're actually taking in, rather than maybe measuring a tablespoon out, pouring it in the pan and brushing it around with a spatula or something like that, or spraying it on can make sure you're not getting way more than you need. So again, just some ideas here when we're looking at like cheese, like an ounce, think like dice. It's very small actually. All right, maximizing your efforts. I like to talk about this because while we may not necessarily need to increase or decrease your calories, timing your calories around your workouts can be very helpful. If you are looking for performance, this is critical. But after a hard workout, we have a pretty narrow window where our muscles are like a sponge, especially after resistance training or hard interval training. Within 15 to 30 minutes after an intense workout, our bodies are going to absorb 90 to 100% of what we put in. The longer we wait, the less they're going to absorb, which doesn't mean you won't recover eventually, but timing your nutrition properly can be the difference between recovering quickly and being ready to work out again the next day, or sometimes being really sore, having depleted glycogen levels and other performance issues. So I'm giving you some examples here, but again, I'm going to send this out of just what these levels look like. So what those ratios of carbohydrate to protein are for ideal recovery after a workout. I do want to say though that most people who are doing, a 30-minute workout if it's light. If it's intervals, that's different. But if you're going for a brisk walk or a light jog or something like that, you don't necessarily need to fuel right after your workout. However, eating around it, spreading your calories that way can be beneficial. But that's not as critical as someone that's working out a lot harder or a lot longer. With that said, if fat loss is one of your major goals, you're always going to struggle if you overcompensate with calories due to a harder or a longer workout than usual. I have to tell you, most people burn less calories than they think during a workout and tend to out eat it very, very quickly. And I feel like that's where a lot of people get into trouble. I hear all the time, when I started exercising and eating healthier and it didn't work for me, I ended up gaining weight. Probably what happens in most of those cases is they feel like they're burning more than they are. Your smartwatches overestimate how much you're burning. And even if you're swapping out foods, that feel like they're healthier, if you're swapping out regular like Wonder Bread for a really healthy looking, whole grain, whole wheat bread, you have to recognize that that whole grain, whole wheat bread may have twice as many calories as that other slice of bread. So being aware of what you're putting in and aware of what you're burning is very, very important. We're going to talk more about those calorie burns next week, but also to recognize that to lose 1 pound of fat requires a 3,500 calorie deficit. So if you're looking at trying to lose 1 pound of fat per week, we try to look at a 500 calorie deficit per day. If you have maintained your current weight for 6 months or more, then I usually assume you're eating at a maintenance level. And while we may need to distribute your calories better, we probably don't need to cut it back. And if that's the case, I would almost always rather increase physical activity than decrease food, because that can result in other problems like your metabolism slowing down, you not having enough energy, and things like that. If you're gaining weight, then we probably need to look at what we can do to kind of help limit the amount of calories you're eating, or maybe make substitutions to reduce it. Most people operate pretty well on slightly reducing their calories while increasing physical activity at the same time. But again, with that said, keep in mind, people have very different calorie burn requirements. After having done fitness testing for years with very precise measurements of oxygen consumption and things like that, I have seen particularly older women who are in very poor shape burn as little as 3 calories per minute, even when they're exerting themselves very hard. And younger, especially male athletes, burn upwards of 25 to 30 calories per minute. So it's all over the place. My point with that is, just because a workout promises that you're going to burn 500 calories, it doesn't mean that's going to work for you. A lot of those estimates are based on either a 150 or 185 pound person, which doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for a lot of people out there. We usually ballpark and say that the average adult burns somewhere around 100 calories for moving 1 mile. But I know personally, I weigh about 98 pounds, so I literally burn about 75 calories per mile, whereas someone who weighs closer to 200 pounds might burn 150. Either way, typically we're burning less than we eat, or burning less than we think, and usually consuming more than we think. But more on that next week. Stay tuned. Rise and dine. Well, as I mentioned before, those glycogen stores tend to be somewhat depleted, especially in the morning. So it's a really good idea to top off your tank. It doesn't mean you can't do a first thing in the morning workout if you ate a little bit later in the evening. And eating in the evening isn't a bad thing. If you need the calories, that's perfectly fine. Where most people get in trouble with eating at night is eating mindlessly or eating above their calorie needs. So fueling with things that are coming from carbohydrate, from protein, from fat, and from the fruits and vegetables, really important. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, getting a wide variety and balancing our meals. And creating an even spread. We're almost done, I promise. So like the slide about the protein, most people kind of tend to eat this way. Not everybody, but a lot of folks skip breakfast. Maybe they eat a small lunch, or maybe they eat a big lunch. But typically in the American diet, the biggest eating tends to be at night, which has multiple issues. But for the most part, if you think about lighting a fire, If you want a fire that's gonna burn really hot, really fast, you're gonna make it with little sticks and keep putting those sticks in, which is a little bit more like this. If you just stick a giant log in a fire pit and put a lighter underneath it and hope it's gonna light, it'll probably light eventually, but it's gonna burn very slow and it's not gonna burn very hot. Eating those giant meals can really slow you down. And if we can take the same amount of calories and spread them throughout the day, especially around our workouts, sometimes our bodies can function a lot better and you can actually get much better results that way. All right, I know that was a lot of information, but action items for this week. And again, don't worry, you don't have to write it down. I'm gonna send them out. Thinking about breaking up your protein throughout the day. So if you have a little bit of lean protein at each meal, it's gonna help not only build and repair muscle tissue, help with immune function, but it's also gonna keep you satisfied and maintain your blood. Maybe trying a new fruit or vegetable that you've never tried before. Start just watching what your portions are. You know, have you been constantly thinking you're eating 1 or 2 servings, but you're eating more than that? Paying attention to what that looks like. So one of your challenge activities for the week, if you can, take a picture of a meal that you have that has something from each food group. So that would be, you know, fuel, carbohydrates. We're looking at protein, looking at fat, something that's well balanced. Also, if you can, I would love to have you try swapping out a complex carbohydrate for a simple one. And at least 1 or 2 meals this week, but ideally 3. So maybe you're taking that just Fruity Pebbles or whatever you're having for breakfast and trying like an overnight oats recipe or something like that. Or maybe swapping out spaghetti squash for regular pasta. There's lots of options. If you need ideas, please reach out and let me know. I am actually going to be adding more links here, but I've got multiple recipes. I'm sending you a cookbook, and this toolkit really, again, goes over some basic nutrition stuff that can help whatever your goals are. If you still have questions after that, don't forget, you know where to find me. Please email me, reach out, set an appointment, but look for this recording as well as the slideshow and other materials later today. Thanks, everybody. Hope to